Willow padded down the narrow sidewalk of Main Street, her paws silent on the damp asphalt as the clock struck midnight. The street lamps glowed in amber pools, their light flickering against shuttered storefronts, and the lace of wrought iron balconies overhead. Every window reflected the stillness of the sleeping town, save for one flicker of movement in an upstairs parlor, already closed, already dark, and already seeming far from the world Willow inhabited. Her sleek, brindle coat rippled with each step, and the low rumble of her own breathing mingled with the distant hum of the highway beyond the ridge. She had claimed this stretch of pavement as her own long ago, abandoned by one household, shunned by another, yet embraced by every trash bin and quiet alleyway. Willow knew every crack in the sidewalk where worms drifted by lamplight, every creaking gate that groaned under its own age, and every soft swell of wind that heralded a coming storm. But tonight, the air carried an unfamiliar perfume, a faint tang of smoke that tugged at her sensitive nose, incongruous in the crisp autumn night. It slipped through the neighborhood like a silent thief, clinging to the cool air and promising hidden danger. Willow paused outside a neat row of Victorian homes, their peaked roofs etched against the sky. One house in particular drew her attention, a tidy dwelling with white shutters and a rose bush arched at the doorway, its blossoms wilted by the season's chill. No one lived here now, she thought. That family moved away last spring. But still, the embers of domestic life lingered in the scent of old cooking oil and forgotten memories. Yet beneath those lingering, homely smells, Willow now discerned the acrid bite of smoke, subtle but growing stronger with every heartbeat. She followed the scent down the narrow driveway, stepping lightly over a broken clay pot, and past a wind-scarred fence where the boards had begun to rot. The smoke wreathed the eaves of the house, curling from a cracked window pane on the second floor, almost invisible against the dark clapboard siding. Willow's heart hammered as she realized the source. A smoldering fire, perhaps a dropped cigarette or an overheated lamp, now feeding unseen flames within the walls. The heat was muted outside, but Willow's instincts told her it would not stay that way for long. With a low whine, she sprang forward, pawing at the front door in frantic taps that echoed through the stillness. Inside, the family slept. Mother and father blissfully unaware of the encroaching blaze, children buried in blankets down the hall. Willow's nails rattled against the wood, and she backed away, trotted around the corner, and approached the nearest window. There she leapt up on her hind legs, bracing her forepaws against the sill and pressing her muzzle against the cracked glass. Smoke seeped through the split pane, and Willow let out a sustained, urgent bark, a clarion call that shattered the midnight hush and carried its warning down the empty street. Moments later, a light flicked on inside, a child's nightlight glowing in the hallway. Doors flew open and panicked voices drifted into the night air. "Willow, what is it?" As the family tumbled onto the porch, the father glanced at the smoke's thin tendrils against the dark siding and rushed inside with his wife and children, following close behind. Willow sprang back, thumping her tail against the railing, and then darted to the side gate to guide them. Her bark turned to a rapid series of yips, each one laced with direction, urging them away from the front door and toward the safer backyard. Within minutes, the family emerged into the crisp night air, coughing and blinking against the sudden gust of smoke as they closed the front door behind them. Willow led them around the house, her fur glistening beneath the street lamps, until they reached the neighbor's yard, where they paused and pressed close together. Sirens wailed in the distance as the fire department's trucks thundered onto Main Street, red lights flashing in tandem with the town's dawning panic and relief. Willow stood guard by the children, her head held high, her chest heaving with pride and adrenaline. As the firefighters attacked the interior flames, now visible through blackened windows, Willow collapsed against the picket fence, her task complete for now. The family circled her, arms wrapping around her brindle shoulders, and whispered thanks into her ears. In that moment, under the watching eyes of townsfolk drawn from their beds by the commotion, Willow the stray dog became more than a homeless prowler of midnight lanes. She became their guardian, their herald of danger, and the loyal sentinel whose vigilance had saved their lives before the fire could consume the heart of their home. The family stood huddled in the neighbor's driveway, the acrid tang of smoke clinging to their clothes as they watched flames lick the edges of their once cozy parlor. Behind them, the fire's roar grew, glass cracking and wood splintering in a chorus of destruction. But Willow, her brindle coat still gleaming with the dampness of her earlier exertion, already sensed the next danger. Embers floating on shifting breezes, ready to ignite the dry hedges that framed the yard. She bolted down the brick path that wound around the side of the house, slipping through a gap where the garden gate had splintered. The father, heart-pounding, raced to follow, arms flung wide to part the overgrown raspberry canes that brushed against his jacket. Willow charged ahead, nose to the ground, leading him past the bloated trunks of rose bushes and into the back lot where a stack of firewood teetered unsteadily. Sparks had caught the top logs, and a thin wisp of flame curled upward, unnoticed in the chaos. With a strangled yell, the father lunged forward, tossing the flaming logs aside, even as Willow barked sharply, stamping her paws to crush the dying embers. Smoke swirled around them, and the mother wrapped her arms around their youngest child's shoulders, her breath trembling as she watched Willow's next move. The dog darted through the undergrowth, weaving between saplings, until she reached the old garden shed. Moonlight gleamed on the corrugated metal roof, and Willow sniffed at the base of the door where charred timbers marked another small flare. Slipping beneath the overhang, she nudged the latch with her muzzle, once, twice, until the door creaked open just enough for her to slip inside. The family's teenage son, having recovered some composure, darted after her, flipping on his flashlight to reveal oil cans and paper-wrapped kindling piled dangerously close to a votive candle left by a forgetful neighbor. With no thought for his singed fingertips, he yanked the kindling aside, tossing the oily rags into a wheelbarrow, while Willow's urgent growl kept the candle's dancing flame in his peripheral vision. The wind gusted through the cracks in the siding, feeding the candle's flicker and threatening to launch sparks into the shaded rafters. The sun smashed the candle with the butt of the flashlight, plunging the shed into tentative darkness even as he coughed against the smoke. Willow bounded back outside, turning in tight circles until he followed her out, then sped toward the rear boundary where a discarded barbecue grill leaned dangerously near a dry patch of grass. The mother raced to his side, using the hem of her sweater to pat down the grass as Willow circled the grill, barking in alarm. The grill's coals, still glowing faintly from a forgotten summer cookout, cracked and popped in the choking air. With a swift kick, the teenager toppled the grill onto its side, scattering the embers across damp gravel where they sizzled harmlessly. Willow sniffed each glowing fragment until the final embers died, her tail thumping in triumphant satisfaction. As the fire crews finally corralled the main blaze and directed water hoses against the house's charred shell, the family regrouped by the curb. They wrapped blankets around Willow's quivering form and showered her with trembling praise, scratching between her ears, stroking her back, pressing their faces into her soft fur. The youngest child pressed a small bowl of water into her outstretched paws, and Willow drank deeply, amber eyes reflecting the flicker of emergency lights. In that moment of fragile calm, she was no longer a stray dog wandering lonely streets. She was their guardian, their warning bell in the dark, whose fierce courage had guided them through the night's double threats, keeping them safe until the first light of dawn. Willow slipped through the side gate and around to the back door before the first firefighters even arrived, her paws barely making a sound on the dew-slick stones. The kitchen window was cracked, just enough for her to squeeze through, and inside the house the air was thick with the sour stench of smoldering fabric and old wood. She paused in the dim light cast by the flashing emergency lights outside, ears swiveling as she picked out the faint crackle of heat in the walls. The living room lay bare of its usual comfort. Family photos on the mantel were skewed, and the plush armchair that once rocked the youngest child's bedtime stories sat tipped on its side, its cushion blackened at the corner. Willow's sensitive nose quivered as she followed a trail of singed carpet fibers and hot plaster dust toward the staircase. A wisp of smoke curled down the hall like a pale ribbon. Willow padded cautiously along the hardwood floor, paws clicking softly against the polished surface, whiskers brushing against the low railing. Each careful step brought a new hint of danger, the radiating warmth beneath her belly as the fire inched unseen behind the walls. the slight give of a weakened floorboard, the oppressive choking in her throat that told her the flames lay just out of sight. At the foot of the stairs, she paused and raised her muzzle to inhale, nostrils flaring wide. There it was, that ugly tang of scorching plastic mingled with the acrid snap of overheated insulation. Without hesitation, Willow darted up the staircase, claws scrabbling across the treads as she raced toward the source. On the landing, the front hallway stretched out like a yawning tunnel, and above the second-floor ceiling, the orange glow of embers flickered against the wallpaper. Willow's hackles rose as the heat pressed down on her, but she pressed on, rushing along the narrow corridor and nudging a half-open door with her shoulder. Inside the master bedroom, the sight made her throat tighten. Curtains billowed around a low flame that licked the pale paint of the wall, having eaten through the fabric of the drapes and begun to crawl upward toward the rotten window frame. The mattress of the bed lay untouched, and the dresser's drawers stood open as though the family had fled without care for their belongings. Willow sprang onto the bed, landing in a crouch at the foot, and let out a single piercing bark that rattled the window panes. The flames snapped higher in response, as if hungry for her attention. Moments later, the father burst through the doorway, coughing through a sweat-soaked shirt, flashlight in hand. His eyes widened at the sight of the fire's progress, and then at Willow's urgent gaze. He knelt beside her, breathing hard, and whispered, "This way, quick!" Willow bounded down from the bed and led him back into the hallway, barking again to draw his focus to the stairs. She raced down one flight, then halted on the landing and barked louder, her hackles bristling with insistence. The father understood. There was a passage at the other end of the hallway, a trapdoor to the attic, too small for a person, but just wide enough for Willow. She scrambled up the trapdoor's ladder, her paws working the rungs with practiced ease, and popped her head through into the unfinished attic. The rafters groaned overhead, and the attic's single bare bulb flickered as smoke poured in. There, on the far side, a plug-in space heater lay toppled, its coils glowing red as they burned through a tangle of cloth. Willow darted around its base, her bark echoing in the rafters, stamping her paws on the bare floor to send a final plea downstairs. The father appeared at her side in seconds, hands trembling as he switched off the heater's power supply, yanking the cord free and beating out stray sparks with his boot. He scooped Willow into his arms, carrying her down into the hallway as he surveyed the damage. Scorch marks on the beams, singed insulation falling in gray clumps, and the acrid haze that filled every corner. The mother and children, having heard the commotion, joined them at the bottom of the stairs, faces pale but filled with relief. Together they filed out the front door into the cool night air, hearts pounding, as firefighters rushed past with hoses and axes to advance on the charred attic. Willow slumped against the father's chest, tongue lolling, body quivering with the exertion of her rescue. The family wrapped her in a blanket, tears shining in their eyes, and whispered their gratitude once more. In the flickering light of the fire truck's spotlights, Willow realized that her midnight patrols had taken her far beyond lonely streets, into the very heart of danger, and that with each silent footstep, she had earned her place not just as a stray dog, but as the unwavering guardian whose vigilance and bold tracking had uncovered the hidden peril before it consumed the home she had silently loved. Willow's urgent barks reverberated against the quiet facade of the house, cutting through the night like a warning siren. She raced back around to the front, paws skidding on the dew-soaked path, ears pricked and head low, until she reached the window of the children's bedroom. The glass was still cool to her nose from the night air, but behind it she saw movement, tiny figures tumbling in frightened wake as the youngest child sat up, eyes wide. With a powerful leap, she planted her front paws against the sill and pressed her muzzle flat against the pane, letting out a rapid staccato of barks and whines that trembled with urgency. Inside, the boy, and his older sister beside him, froze at Willow's insistent noise. The curtains had begun to blacken at the bottom corner of the window frame, smoke curling upward in tendrils that wrapped around the children's breath. The boy's nightlight flickered, illuminating the room in soft pinks and purples, but it could not mask the growing threat. Willow pawed at the glass again, then turned her gaze down the street as if summoning reinforcements. The sister sprang from her bed, thick curls bouncing, and shook her brother's arm. "Mom! Dad!" she cried, voice cracking as she opened the door a crack to call out. Willow slipped back through the narrow gap she had made earlier and bounded down the hallway toward the master bedroom's slightly ajar door. Her footsteps were muffled against the rug, but her presence was enough. A low growl followed by another piercing bark to rouse their parents. The father tumbled from the bed, blanket in hand, heart pounding as he followed the sound. The mother, already half awake, flicked on the bedroom light to reveal smoke seeping through the cracks of the doorway. The father threw open the door to the landing just as Willow dashed ahead, her tail a whip of motion, beckoning them down the stairs. Each bark was a beacon, relentless, commanding, impossible to ignore. The parents grasped each other's hands, then rushed after Willow, racing past the smoldering drapes she had alerted them to, past the small fire she had pinpointed in the attic, and toward the side door where she had first awakened them. The hallway lamp cast elongated shadows as they sprinted, the walls streaked with smoke that clawed at their lungs. Willow skidded to a halt at the threshold of the front door, looked back with imploring eyes, and barked once more. Final confirmation that no one remained inside. As they tumbled into the cool night air, the mother scooped up the trembling toddler while the father ushered the older child close. Willow spun in tight circles, barking encouragement as if to make sure every family member was accounted for. Then she fell silent, lying flat on the porch step, eyes never leaving the doorway, where the fire's glow now danced hungrily across the walls. Behind them, the first firefighters arrived, their hoses uncoiling with practiced speed. Willow watched as jets of water slammed against the glowing ceiling, steam rising in the great white clouds. The family huddled together on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around Willow, in a circle of gratitude and wonder. Through the haze of smoke and flashing lights, Willow realized that her insistent barks at that window, her urgent plea, had given the family the precious few seconds they needed to escape. And as embers fell like sparks from the sky, she knew they would never forget the stray dog, whose voice in the dark had carried the warning that saved their lives. Willow shook herself, flicking smoke-tinged droplets from her brindle coat as the family regrouped at the curb, hearts hammering in their chests. But her work was not yet done. From the corner of her eye, she spotted a danger they had not yet seen: the collapsing porch roof above the front door, blackened beams sagging under the heat and threatening to fall at any moment. She darted forward, barking sharply, and the father grabbed his youngest and yanked him back just as a charred rafter splintered and crashed onto the porch below. With a rapid series of yips, Willow turned and headed toward the side alley, her preferred escape route when the front yard was compromised, her paws skidding on the garden stones coated in ash. The mother, clutching their eldest's hand, followed close behind, casting panicked glances at the rising flames through the front windows. Willow paused at the alley gate, then turned her head, back to the open street and the still-burning house, barked twice, and raced down the narrow passage. The mother and children hesitated only a heartbeat before racing after her, boots thudding against the wooden fence posts. In the alley's dim light, Willow led them past overturned trash bins and tangled garden hoses, guiding them toward the backyard gate. The smoke hung low in the alley, stinging their eyes, but Willow's silhouette cut a clear path ahead, her steady presence a beacon in the churning haze. As they emerged from the alley into the neighbor's side yard, the father unlocked the old wrought iron gate and propelled them onto the quiet street beyond, away from the conflagration's roar. Willow paused at the corner, once more barking to ensure the family had all made it through, then loped alongside them as they hurried toward a waiting fire engine's pump truck that had halted under the street lamp. There, surrounded by the comforting hum of hoses and the determined shouts of firefighters, the family finally exhaled. The teenager knelt to hug Willow's muddy flanks, tears streaking down soot-smeared cheeks, while the youngest pressed her small face into Willow's neck, whispering, "Thank you." Willow wagged her tail once, then settled on her haunches, gaze flicking between the family who had saved her food scraps and the firefighting crews battling the flames that had threatened to consume a home and the lives within. In that circle of relief and gratitude, beneath the glare of emergency lights, Willow, once a lonely stray, stood at the heart of a community bound together by her fearless guidance through flames and fear. As the family plunged through the alley and burst into the safety of the neighbor's yard, Willow's ears pricked at every crack and pop behind them. The house's embers collapsing, the roof's timbers snapping like giant matches. Yet she did not pause. With purposeful steps, she led them across the dew-slick grass, her tail held low but steady, guiding them toward the faint glow of the street lamp, where the fire crews had set up their command post. The father, the mother, and their two wide-eyed children followed her in single file, arms linked and breathing in ragged gasps, trusting every turn of her flank and every bark to point them away from danger. Behind them, a wall of flame blossomed where the porch once stood, waves of heat pushing outward in shimmering waves that distorted the night air. Black smoke boiled skyward, turning the stars to embers as it consumed the parlor and the stairwell beyond. Willow glanced back only once, ensuring no one lingered in the house's choking maw, then turned forward, her paws parting the tall grass as she guided them toward the open street. The father patted her flank and whispered, "This way, girl," his voice thick with tears, and Willow responded with a single, crisp bark, as if to confirm, "Keep moving." They reached the street as firefighters directed hoses down side roads, diverting traffic and securing hydrant hookups. The mother scooped the toddler into her arms, pressing the child's face into her sweater to filter the smoky air, while the older sibling clung to Willow's neck, clutching the dog's collar as though to anchor themselves to her unwavering courage. Willow led them to a parked ambulance where paramedics stood ready, their faces kind beneath masks, offering blankets and warm saline. The family huddled beneath a thermal blanket, tears mingling with soot on their cheeks. As Willow settled protectively at their feet, her gaze sweeping the chaos, hose lines snaking across pavement, firefighters advancing on the blaze, neighbors emerging to watch in hushed awe. For nearly an hour she remained by their side, even as the fire crews brought the inferno under control, dousing the final hotspots and prying apart burnt beams to ensure no flare-ups remained. When the captain finally radioed all clear, the family rose together, trembling but whole, and approached Willow. Each placed a hand on her brindle coat, thumbs stroking her ears, fingers ruffling her fur, in a silent chorus of gratitude. The youngest reached down to offer her a scrap of sandwich from a paramedic's pouch. Willow accepted it with a gentle lick, then looked up into their faces, her dark eyes shining with steadfast loyalty. As the night gave way to the soft promise of dawn, the family led by Willow returned along Main Street, guided now by the relief crews, clearing barricades and bystanders tipping hats in respect. She walked between them, nose high and chest proud, each step a testament to the bond forged in fear and flames. And when they reached the edge of town, where road lamps waned into country darkness, the family knelt to embrace her one last time. Willow returned each nuzzle with warm nudges, then turned and bounded off into the twilight, her silhouette flickering between porch lights, leaving behind a home spared and a family forever bound by the courage of a stray dog's guiding heart. As the first pale light of dawn washed over Main Street, the charred remains of the family's home stood solemnly against the sky, pillars of smoke curling upward like graying ghosts. Yet, in the soft morning glow, the neighborhood itself felt transformed, no longer merely a row of modest houses, but the stage for a miracle born of one dog's loyalty. Willow padded down the still smoldering driveway, her brindle coat mottled with soot and dew, ears pricked for the family she had guided through the night's perils. From the edge of the yard, the father emerged, dressed in a borrowed flannel shirt, carrying a steaming mug of coffee offered in tentative gratitude. Behind him came the mother, her face pale but eyes bright with relief, cradling the youngest child wrapped in a warm blanket. Their eldest, cheeks still streaked with ash, trotted at Willow's side, carrying the framed family portrait that, though singed at the edges, remained miraculously intact. The family paused before Willow, forming a loose semicircle as the boy set the photograph on the front step, a testament to the home they had nearly lost. One by one, they knelt to Willow's level. The mother stroked her ears with gentle fingers, murmuring words of thanks as Willow's tail thumped softly against the brick path. The father pressed a crisp $20 bill into her collar, later destined for her veterinary care, though Willow seemed content simply to meet his gaze with deep, trusting eyes. The eldest wrapped an arm around her neck, whispering, "You're one of us now," and Willow leaned into the embrace, chin resting on his shoulder like the family dog she had quietly become. Across the street, neighbors gathered with steaming mugs and blankets, offering their own gestures of thanks. Homemade pastries, fleeces for Willow to sleep on, invitations to Sunday walks through the park. The community, once strangers behind closed doors, now felt woven together by shared wonder at the stray who risked her life to save theirs. A local reporter arrived with a camera crew, capturing Willow's silent dignity as she accepted each gift. But the family shooed them away politely, insisting that this was not a tale for headlines, but a private blessing for those who lived on Willow Lane. As firefighters extinguished the last embers and the reconstruction crews began assessing the damage, the family led Willow around the perimeter of their yard, pointing out where they would erect a new porch, one built sturdier, with a wide ledge just her size, where Willow could rest at night. They spoke softly of finding her a proper collar, with her new name embroidered at the buckle, "Willow, Guardian of Home." Willow's ears flicked at her new name, and she gave a single low chuff of approval before bounding ahead, eager to explore the promise of safe porches and morning patrols begun anew. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high enough to banish the last wisps of smoke from the sky. Willow stood at the curb, watching the bustle of a town awakened not by disaster, but by the shared gratitude it inspired. Children waved as they walked to school past her, neighbors tipped hats in respect, and the family, whole and smiling, returned home together, Willow their loyal vanguard. In the distance, the newly purchased porch swing creaked under its first weight, and Willow trotted forward to claim her place, heart steady with the knowledge that she was no longer a wanderer, but the cherished guardian of a family's hearth and home.